Hello, and welcome to the Dungeon. I'm your host, Rob. In today's video, I figured we'd continue with our series where we've been going through making various members of the Avengers, and we really just have two members of the original Avengers left. We've got the Hulk and we've got Hawkeye. I guess we could take Loki as well. That way we could get a pure caster type of guy in there. Not a bad idea, especially because, he kind of becomes more of an anti-hero over time. But in the first one, he's just a straight up villain. Either way, though, today we're going to be looking at Hawkeye. And I think it's kind of ironic that of all the Avengers, Hawkeye is definitely one of the least powerful in the first movie. And he spends most of the first movie being brainwashed and working for the bad guys. Also not great. Should have had Indomitable, I guess. But he makes one of the best D&D characters, though, because archers are amazing in 5th edition. So we're going to be taking a look at how to create Hawkeye in D&D. Now, as per usual, if you want to get really, just basically be Hawkeye, then that's fine. But we're looking to more make a character kind of inspired by Hawkeye and kind of be that type of character or archetype, not necessarily specifically him. Also, there are multiple versions of Hawkeye, really. The comic book version of Hawkeye, like Clint Barton Hawkeye, was actually an entertainer and like a circus performer at the beginning, and he used all sorts of trick shots and arrows and stuff because he was an entertainer. He then later became a criminal and later decided to kind of turn his life around and become a superhero. However, the one in the movies, as far as I can tell, he just seems to be a straight up soldier, And so, depending on your background, I think really entertainer, criminal, or soldier would all be fine. I'm going to be going fighter as our class, at least as our main class anyway. So I think that soldier is always going to be a fairly good fit there. But because we are a dex-based fighter using a bow, going criminal does give us the option of getting thieves' tools as a proficiency right off the bat. And sure, you're never going to be as good as a rogue will, of course, but you could have proficiency and use dexterity. And if your party doesn't have a rogue and you think you might need a little more versatility, that's not a bad bet either. And then entertainer is probably the least beneficial from a playing power level standpoint. But personally, I like entertainer background because I think that those kind of characters tend to be a lot of fun. You can do a lot of bombastic, showing off and stuff and do crazy things in game, which can just be, a lot of fun for a character to play. So, use your own discretion is what I'm saying. Now, if you're looking more at the Kate Bishop style, most of this video is going to be about the Clint Barton Hawkeye that we see in the first Avengers movie, right? But I will say that Kate Bishop's Hawkeye tends to be a little less soldiery and a little more crime-solving, investigatory. And I think that works fine as well. So we will give some options for that or incorporate that into the character as well. But for the most part, we've been looking at one of those main backgrounds I mentioned. We're going to be probably going human, but I think that there are some arguments for others. Obviously, if we were trying to just recreate the characters from the comics or from the movies, they're human. So we'd be going variant human. However, if we went something like custom lineage, that would give us the option of having that 17 dex initially. And if we combined it with, say, the Piercer feat or something along those lines, we could push that up to an 18 at character creation, which is really nice, right? Good argument there. Another option is to go with elf or half elf, and we could take the elven accuracy feat and then, of course, use dexterity with it. And that also has a lot of value. So just throwing out some different options there. If you wanted to go human, I think that's perfectly fine too. It's also the most accurate, right? So, if we're trying to kind of follow the lore a bit, human's a good choice. Some of these others, though, they aren't bad either. The problem with elf or half elf is we're not getting a feat at first level. So now you're needing to add elven accuracy, and we're going to still want sharpshooter at some point. Because the truth is that sharpshooter isn't really great at super low levels because the hit penalty is quite prohibitive and our dexterity still kind of sucks. We don't have magic weapons yet. Our proficiency bonus sucks, etc. But Sharpshooter is the best feat in the game for adding huge amounts of damage. And as our character scales more and gets more attacks, like the value we get from Sharpshooter versus, say, Piercer or Elven Accuracy, Sharpshooter wins hands down. If we're constantly getting advantage, then Elven Accuracy can be really, really good as well. So if we combine it with, say, maybe we also take the Alert feat on top of that, and we combine it with like Assassin Rogue or something, and now we got a super high initiative and we're attacking first in the combat, we're always able to get advantage on those attacks, then, that's pretty good. But in general, just comparing these feats 1v1, Sharpshooter is probably the worst one at level 1, and probably the best one at level 5 and beyond. and it never really gets any worse from there either. Just the more attacks and the more bonuses that you're able to stack, the better Sharpshooter becomes. So if I was given an option of, well, you can only take one of these feats, it would be Sharpshooter, hands down, no question about it. But that doesn't mean that some of these others aren't good too. Other ones we might want to add, I mentioned Alert. Mobile might be nice to add at some point. This isn't one I'm going to be taking at level 1 though. Crossbow Expert, even though we're using a bow and arrow, Crossbow Expert does allow us to ignore like disadvantage if we have characters in melee range against us, which can be pretty handy. But we could also do things like multi-class Rogue, which is a nice option, especially in the Kate Bishop option. And then we could just use our Cunning action to disengage instead. And we can even get a bit of sneak attack damage and some other options there. So there's more than one way to get around it. I don't think the mobile and I don't think the Crossbow Expert are really as required. I'm just mentioning that, as a fighter, you will get a bunch of extra feats. Might be nice to have some options for what to do to those with those later on. But the early ones I'm going to be looking at are Sharpshooter for sure, Piercer if I'm starting as like custom lineage to get that 18 dex, and Elven Accuracy if I went elf or half elf to bump my dex and get super advantage if I think I'm going to be able to get advantage a lot. And like I said, that one's especially good with like an assassin build as well, where we can get advantage automatically on the first round if we're acting before enemy, and now we get super advantage on top of that. But typically you need to kind of build things around that in order to get consistent value out of it, whereas Sharpshooter is just going to be good, period, Anyways, enough of that. For our class, we are going to be going Fighter, like I said, and I'm going to be going Arcane Archer. Yes, there are some good arguments for like Battle Master using maneuvers, or even Eldritch Knight and using things like your, weapon bond on your bow and stuff like that, and using some spell effects and stuff. But honestly, Arcane Archer is just such a perfect fit. It does a lot of what we see Hawkeye do in the movies and stuff and the comics. Things like bursting arrows, or explosive arrows. He uses like grappling arrows a lot, which is a nice substitute for our grasping arrow. He uses like sound arrows sometimes, and there is like a which is it? Is it beguiling? No, shadow arrow. No, beguiling does psychic damage and can charm people, and then shadow can blind people. But either way, he's got a bunch of trick arrows, and I think that the arcane infusion arrows are a pretty nice fit for that. Also, Arcane Archer just kind of seems to be what he is. It fits quite nicely. He's not really casting spells. He's using trick arrows, and I think that's a lot easier to kind of skin in there, So I'm going to be starting with Fighter. Obviously, if we're starting Fighter, we're getting a feat, we're getting extra feats. We're getting a fighting style right at level 1, and we're taking Archery, of course. Archery is the best fighting style in the game. If you're playing an Archer, there's literally no reason not to use it if you went Fighter, or anybody else who has it available, like Ranger, for example. All right, if that's available, and you're using a bow as your primary attack weapon, or any sort of ranged weapon, that's the one to take. Now, if you're playing a two-handed weapon fighter, then obviously archery is not going to be your best fighting style, right? But overall, it's the best one in the game. And part of the reason for it is A, missing sucks, but B, things like Sharpshooter giving you a hit penalty in exchange for that big damage bonus This helps to overcome that hit penalty. And just the more bonuses we can stack and add, the more consistently sharpshooter's damage is just going to like ramp up our damage numbers. This is another good thing about an archer that I see a lot of people not necessarily mention, but because you're using, let's say, a great sword compared to a bow, right? Now you could say, well, the fighter has 20, this fighter has 20 strength, this one has 20 dex. They both are the same level, so they have the same proficiency bonus. So really the only difference would be the fighting style. But that isn't even true, because that fighter could have a +3 greatsword, but the archer could have a +3 bow. He could also have magical arrows, +1, +2, +3 arrows, arrows of slaying, whatever, right? In other words, you can start stacking these bonuses on top of each other. So you've got your proficiency bonus, you've got your dex bonus, you've got the archery fighting style, and you've got a magic bow, and now you've got magic arrows. And all that helps to overcome that -5 hit penalty, and we just start stacking that +10 damage over and over and over again, especially with things like action surge. This is what really allows us to just ramp that damage up. And then, of course, fighters are the only ones who get more than 2 attacks per round, as part of extra attack. And granted, it's not happening until 11. Maybe your character doesn't even make it that far. Who knows? But he could. And now you've got 3 attacks a round and 6 with action surge. And, like I said, it can get really, really crazy. As far as other options, like I said, adding in some rogue levels, I don't mind at all. And the main reason for this is because, like I said, the Kate Bishop version, she's kind of more the investigator, has a lot more skills in that kind of way. I think that going something like Inquisitive Rogue makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, Inquisitive is not one of the greater subclasses, but I do think that it kind of fits, and I don't mind that at all. And like I said, Assassin's also a pretty good bet. You've got a decent dexterity, or we've got a really good dexterity. There's a good chance that you could be acting before at least somebody in the combat round. And one of the nice things about having a ranged weapon is you're never going to be in that situation where the fight starts and you're 150 feet away, and now you can't even attack in the opening round because you had to dash or whatever else, right? You're just like, oh yeah, I just shoot them with my bow because I've got range. And, that is very nice as well. So I don't mind that at all. Like I said, Assassin, also a really good pick. The main thing I like about adding Rogue, though, which is something I alluded to earlier, is that we don't really have a lot to do with our bonus action. Yes, at level 7, we can get curving arrow, so if we miss on our arrow, then we can try to curve it into another target. That's not bad, and even with a bunch of bonuses, if you're using Sharpshooter consistently with enough attacks around, you're going to miss on a couple attacks. But there will be times when you're fighting one big powerful enemy and there is no second target to curve to, because you can't, curve it into the same target. It has to be a separate target. And sometimes you just won't have a separate target, So we might want something else that we can do with our bonus action. And cunning action is a really nice mix there. It's a very good fit. So I don't mind this either. We could, use it to disengage, one of my favorites, because shooting with disadvantage sucks, And we can also do things like getting some extra movement from a bonus action dash or something like that, where now we can still use our attack, and then we can just, use our cunning action to reposition ourselves, right? That's fine too. Granted, we are a ranged combatant, so usually we're not going to have to reposition ourselves that often. You just kind of sit back and shoot, and that's fine. But like I say, having those options is rather nice. And getting a couple of dice of sneak attack is never a bad thing either. That being said, if it's like a level 21 shot or something, I might just go straight archer and take the 4 attacks around. Because, why not, right? Mostly I'm going to be looking at different types of arrows that we could be using, right? So obviously at level 3, when we get subclass, we get a couple different options. Well, we get a bunch of different options. The ones I'm looking at are probably taking Bursting Arrow and Grasping Arrow. Bursting Arrow gives us some AoE damage, which is pretty respectable at low levels. But even by level 3, we're starting to get to the point where 2d6 AoE damage just isn't a lot of damage. However, I do feel like it fits the character theme very well, which is why I might want to take it. However, I'm mostly going to be looking to use Grasping Arrow. So if you don't want to take Bursting Arrow and you want to substitute in something else, I think that's fine too. Like I said, 2d6 damage is already by level 3 starting to not be very significant for an AoE attack, right? And then by the time you're level 5, your pure casters have Spiritual Weapon, they've got Fireball, 2d6 is basically nothing at that point. But Grasping Arrow is quite excellent. It is poison damage, which is unfortunate, but the damage on it is pretty good, and the fact that it, restrains things and does damage to them when they move, that kind of stuff is excellent. So some other alternatives, because we do get more arrows at 7, 10, 15, and 18. Banishing Arrows for some nice crowd control. Can be pretty handy. Beguiling Arrow to try to charm people. Shadow Arrow can blind. Seeking, very circumstantial. Piercing, when you can pull it off, is really nice because it just goes through and hits everything in a line. And there are times when you're in a hallway and there's a bunch of guys all in a line and you can hit them all with a piercing arrow, and that is very satisfying. But it's also very circumstantial. This isn't something that usually comes up all the time. So piercing, while kind of cool and nice, and it's super awesome when it works, again, it's kind of a lower priority for me. But like I said, Bursting Arrow, I like it because it fits something we see Hawkeye do a lot, which is use explosive arrows, but the damage doesn't really scale, and So if you want to get away from Bursting Arrow and choose one of these other options, I don't blame you. There's nothing wrong with picking something else. But this is going to give us the core of our build. Like I said, we could multi-class and pick up other stuff. I don't mind the rogue option. I also don't mind just going straight fighter. That's fine too, Getting extra attack, getting 3 attacks around, those things as soon as possible. There's nothing wrong with that. We do kind of fall into some of the same trap that we sometimes get with the high-level Battle Master, where the Battle Master is very front-loaded, the maneuvers are awesome, but by the time we're getting I've mentioned this before, but by the time you're picking your 7th and 8th favorite maneuvers, you've already passed it over 6 or 7 different times. Like, if you wanted it, you would have taken it at 3. And if you were like, it's kind of borderline, then you would have taken it at 7. The fact that you're level 15 and you didn't pick it means it wasn't that good, and it wasn't something you needed that badly, right? And we do kind of get that with the Arcane Archer as well, where you start getting some of these other arrow options, and you're like, yeah, but if it was good, I would have taken it at 3. And if it was borderline, I would have taken it at 7. And now I'm 18, and I'm taking it. Whatever. It's not like some of these things where you're unlocking better and better ones. Like, this was an option at 3, and you didn't want it, so whatever. But that's a minor nitpick. And frankly, like I said, Battle Master especially is so good at low levels. It's pretty hard to complain, Arcane Archer, I think, is also very, very solid. I see a lot of people complaining about it. I think that's started to turn around now. People have kind of realized that Grasping Arrow especially is quite good. And so I think that has kind of helped a lot. I know guys like Treat Monk did a video about it, saying that he thought Arcane Archer was actually really good. I don't think he put it at the top, but it was kind of in that upper half, maybe even upper third. I can't remember exactly where he ranked it. And I think a lot of other people have kind of looked at it since then and been like, yeah, actually, maybe it's not so bad, right? Sure, you can't use it with a crossbow, so things like Crossbow Expert and a hand crossbow are out, but that's okay. Overall, though, I think that this is a really, really solid character. Archers in D&D are spectacular. One of the big keys, I'm just going to go on a little sidetrack here, but one of the big keys to really amping up your damage in 5th edition for for any class really, especially for single target. Obviously, if you're using AoE attacks and you can hit tons of guys at once, that's a different situation. But when you're trying to target down one specific guy, it's really just a combination of having a lot of attacks that hit combined with these bonuses that you can stack, and then you apply those bonuses on lots and lots of hits, right? It's great weapon mastery, it's sharpshooter, things like Eldritch Blast, where you can get Agonizing Blast. That's not bad on its own, especially because you could get like 3 or 4 Eldritch Beams. But then you start looking at options like multi-classing Sorcerer, and then you could cast an Eldritch Blast while quicken casting another Eldritch Blast, and suddenly you're hitting people with 8 beams, and each one of those is getting the damage added over and over and over again, right? But it's the same principle. It's lots of attacks combined with bonuses that you can put on those attacks that then just stack every single time you're able to hit, right? So this is why I'm not as big of a fan of like a rogue with sharpshooter as I am with, say, a fighter with sharpshooter. Because that rogue, unless he's multi-classed, but he's going to be making one attack, a lot of his damage is going to be coming from sneak attack and trying to build up those D6 bonuses. And, you know, a plus 10 to your damage one time in a round is way less impactful than that fighter who maybe attacks 3 times a round and could action surge for 6 attacks a round and is now potentially doing that plus 10 damage 6 times instead of only once, right? And even if he misses on 2 or 3 of those attacks, that's still like 30 or 40 damage from sharpshooter alone getting added on, right? And so just the more attacks you're able to use with something like sharpshooter or great weapon mastery or Eldritch Blast, just the more your damage just amps up and up and up. This is also why things like, say, the bonus action attack that you could have had with, say, something like Crossbow Expert becomes very nice. But even things like Curving Arrow, right? You miss, and you're like, oh, well, that sucks. But wait, there's another guy. I'll just curve it into that guy. And sure, he wasn't the guy I was trying to focus down, but we're going to have to kill that other guy at some point, you know? So, yeah, it's maybe not the ideal, but it's better than just missing and doing no damage, you know? And it's a lot better, by the way. It's not like, well, you know, missing was a 0 out of 10 and curving shot was a 1 out of 10. No, it's, you know, you went from a 0 out of 10 to like a 6 out of 10. Sure, 9 out of 10 would have been focusing down the main target better, you know, but like I said, it's still damage, and you're probably going to have to kill that other guy at some point anyway. So either way, you've got good saving throws, you've got lots of hit points, you've got lots of attacks around, you've got, you know, feats at possibly character creation, but for sure at 4 and 6 and 8, and then, you know, if your campaign goes to 12 and beyond, then, you know, you've got 12, 14, 16, and 19. So you've got a lot of feats and ability score increases. You're also a ranged fighter. So even though you've got lots of hit points, Constitution isn't going to be as much of a priority. Getting away with like 14 con on a frontline fighter, you're like, yeah, you know, it's doable, right? You know, you got good armor class, etc. You know, it's fine. But you'd prefer 16. Whereas on a character like this, even a 12 Constitution really isn't that bad. You're in the back, you're not getting hit that often, you're probably going to be fine. And honestly, you can do a 14 pretty easy. That's not even a stretch, right? So, you know, you tend to be fairly durable. You're tending to not get focused a lot or take a lot of damage, but you're dishing out a lot of damage. You don't have to worry about things, like I said, where the fight starts and you're way too far away, and you can't even do anything for the first round or two because you're having to run up and get into range in order to be able to fight. You know, sharpshooter allows you to ignore the long range penalties and half or even 3/4 cover. So even a lot of those situations where enemies can like try to like fire at you from like behind a pillar or something like that, and they've got like 3/4 cover, you're like, oh, I got sharpshooter. Doesn't matter, you know. And I can still move. So, you know, assuming they can lean out and shoot, then I can move 3 feet to the side and shoot. You know, like, so they just tend to be really solid characters and big damage dealers. And like I said, it is kind of amusing to me that Hawkeye is one of the least powerful of the Avengers, but in D&D terms, turns out to be one of the biggest damage dealers of them all. So that is kind of funny. But anyways, that's the video. Like I said, you can add some rogue levels if you want. You can go straight fighter. I think that works fine. If you want to do something like maybe add like ranger for, you know, gloomstalker for dread ambusher or something, and some dark vision and some more initiative bonuses, you can get a little crazy with stuff like that. I don't think that's a bad idea either. That kind of stuff's fine, right? But really, the core of the build is to be some arcane archer levels combined with the sharpshooter feat, possibly some of the other feats we've mentioned to, you know, just kind of push things up a little bit extra, and just a lot of attacks around. You've got some special trick arrow type attacks that you can use when the situation requires it. And there you go. That's the character. And they're incredibly solid. He is the Hawkeye type character is phenomenal in 5th edition. So anyways, that's everything. Feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and most importantly, like I always say, leave your comments in the comment section. I look forward to reading them, and I will see you next time.